this. Turn the mic on. Hello, everyone. How are you today?
Hello.
Already got some friends hanging out in the chat. SP.
Yes.
Echo 7, whereas we know him as Solo Pirate from our forums.
It's good to see you.
And
Been a little while.
Our friend Sarge, of course, hanging
Always
out.
Sarge.
Oh,
Sin!
and Sin's
Oh,
there
man.
too. This is just
it
the
is
best.
A Port Haven party in here.
All right. And Sarge, you know, you're adopted part of Port Haven, whether you want to be or not. You don't have much of a choice at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
I mean, we just assume that you're okay with being lumped in with whatever we want to do.
Wherever we go, we take you with us.
But we are here today with another Port Haven StreamCast. Voltex there in the chat too. The chat is happening today, right at start time. This is not something that always happens.
I just realized that we did our prep talk for 4 minutes, and I didn't put the link anywhere. So now I'm putting the link.
I put it in some places. So
I'm putting it in some Discord places.
And SP actually shared it on Port Haven for us because he's a
Ooh.
Yeah, Sarge, you can't just... I would faint now, too, but that would be uninteresting for the rest of the stream. It would be really interesting at the beginning of the stream, and then it would be uninteresting for the rest of the stream as YB just sort of talked to herself next to my unconscious self here in the chair. How's everybody today? You doing all right?
If I count as everybody, I'm doing all right. How do you guys like our new decoration that I totally knew about?
I was gonna see how long it took you to notice.
Well, in my defense, I wasn't looking at the chat window for a little while.
It wasn't there to start with either. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and Nox is here. Nox, of course, wants to show up to talk about the Sith.
Always always. It's your third favorite hobby.
I don't know if I want to know what your first two. First two favorite are. And Fat Batman's here. Everybody, the whole gang.
You count. I feel like if you show, I mean, you're just a part of the YouTube sector. If you're on the YouTube, and then there's I guess maybe there's canon and legends, right? You and I would count as legends characters, legacy characters.
There we go. Me, you, and Nino Star are the big three.
Yeah, right. We have a third co-host who's been here the entire time. I don't know if you guys know that. Nino Star. Yep,
Nino Star is here every week. You just
week.
Don't know.
You just don't know it.
Death and deception are Nox's first two favorite activities.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Is that your death or the death of others? Because I feel like if it's your death, that's just kind of a one-time thing. But what do I know? Sarge is the doctor. Maybe she knows more than I do. But
I mean, your shirt says "Trust me, I'm a doctor."
Well, I'm not that kind of doctor. If you need to know about 19th century German political philosophy, that's what I can do for you. If you want to talk about, I got you can see my Star Wars books here. If you look at a shelf, I've got 3 shelves below and 3 shelves above and a whole other bookshelf that's all political philosophy. So if that's what you want, then I'm here for you. And Bear's hanging out here too.
Oh man, this is a party, guys. Yeah. It's so good to see all of you.
I almost just want to chat with you guys.
Right. Well, I mean, we have plenty to talk about.
We do. So today we want to talk about the Sith. So it's kind of an open topic. So if you have particular questions or things that you'd like to get our opinions on, you could ask those in the chat. But anything and everything Sith today is what we'll talk about. This is not necessarily a substitute for Wikipedia articles on the Sith. So if you have really super in-depth specific stuff, then I can vamp while I look stuff up on Google for you, if that's what you want. But otherwise, we're just here to kind of talk about stuff. So right off the bat, let's just go with this question while we've got it. Sin wants to know who we think is the strongest Sith.
It's a toughie in a lot of ways, because the thing is with the Sith is they're a lot more diverse than they're given credit for, right? Like you have Palpatine the planner, you know, Bane. I mean, he was a planner, but he was more of a tactician in a way that I don't think Palpatine was.
Right.
But then you have other characters like, say, Vader or Revan. And we were talking about this a little bit before the stream, but shh, Bear, don't tell anyone.
She is a Sith. She murdered one of her favorite characters yesterday on her KOTOR stream.
I'm gonna timestamp that, actually. It was good. Well, that's where this topic came from, as I was being forced into Sithiness yesterday in the KOTOR stream. But with Revan or Vader, they were both very, very powerful. But I would almost argue the reason why both of them got so powerful is they also had an understanding of the complete Force,
I think
right?
so.
Because Revan, especially, because I mean, obviously Vader was redeemed in the end, but Revan actually got to live in his redemption, where Vader did not.
Right.
And I think having an understanding of both sides. So to that extent, I think Revan is one of the most powerful. Obviously in Legends, he's not currently in current canon. But I would argue he's powerful not because he's a Sith, but because he's both.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like pure just a Sith, in current canon's easier because in current canon there's not as many, and it would probably be, I would say,
sure.
Palpatine. In Legends, it's just too hard to pick in Legends for me, I think. Yeah, that's the thing, Knox. Is I don't think Bane ever did.
I guess I would have to say, I don't know. It's such a complicated question because, like, you know, like you said, like they're strong in different things.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just sheer connection to the Force, I think it has to be Vader, given that like the Force is his parentage.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, you know, his potential was limited in part by his injuries, and so like he had a different relationship with the Force in general, not just the dark side, than somebody like Revan did. So if it's who has the strongest connection to the Force, I think it's Vader. If it's who would win in a fight, I think it's Revan. If it who, and this is gonna piss off Knox probably, but is it who most embodies the philosophy of the Sith? If we discount the Plagueis novel, I think it's probably Palpatine. And that's not to say that I don't like Darth Bane, but I feel like Bane created something and then Palpatine kind of masterminded that later on.
Yeah. I would say Bane created the ideal philosophy for the Sith, but it was impossible because no one besides Bane could ever follow it. And I'm not fully convinced that Bane even really did. Right.
Well, I also feel like this is maybe something we can talk about too. This is a Terry headcanon kind of thing, less than, you know, confirmed. This is from a book kind of thing. Yep, Knox, that's the one. But the very same Sheev Palpatine. But I feel like, in a way, the Sith is like a teaching and philosophy. You know, if you want to think about it as like a dogma or a theology or like a philosophical school, I think it's at a deficit to the teachings of the Jedi. One, because most Sith don't live long enough to develop the kind of in-depth training that a Jedi can. But because like it's not necessarily that all of the Jedi are like academics about it or philosophers about it, but I feel like Jedi teaching lends itself more to understanding the Force for the sake of understanding the Force. And because Sith teaching has such a particular sort of aim that's, personal to each different Sith Lord. I feel like that makes a difference there too. I kind of lost where I was going with that, but
it's all right. I was getting distracted by my Book of the Sith that is in my hands.
And Knox wants to know how they let a Jedi get a hold of one, and the answer to that is Amazon.com.
That is where these came from. You really gotta wonder. The most powerful Force being in the universe might actually be Daniel Wallace, considering he wrote the Book of the Sith and the Jedi Book of the Jedi.
Right.
I saw, unfortunately, Echo 7 had to step away, but I think it was he who posted this question I kind of wanted to go back to, because I think it's a good entry-level, not necessarily entry-level, it's a kind of confusing thing, but were all Sith called Darth? Mostly, but, the early Sith Lords weren't.
Yeah.
We just saw yesterday, I was playing Knights of the Old Republic, we were on Korriban, and the tombs you have Tulak Horde, Freedom Nad's in KOTOR 2, Marco Ragnos, Magenta Paul. The first Sith Lords weren't called Darth. Right. Actually, Knox, do you remember where the term Darth came from? I know there's an answer, and I'm just blanking on it, but you might know. Yeah, Naga Sadao, that's the other one. And so at some point they took on the title Darth. When you were a Dark Lord of the Sith. The Sith in Legends canon is actually a species. It was a Force-sensitive species known as the Sith.
Right.
People who broke away from the Jedi Order because they had fallen to the dark side subjugated them and took on the name of the species as their order.
I mean, and it was still always assumed, at least hinted at in Legends canon too, that the real Sith Empire was still out there somewhere.
Right.
Too, right?
Right. I'm sure in this book somewhere is the explanation of the word Darth, but I don't think it has a table of contents.
So, I mean, the out-of-universe explanation for that is that, at the time of A New Hope, it was more or less assumed that was Darth Vader's first name.
Yeah. Only a master of evil, Darth.
Yeah.
And then it became a title.
I mean, and this is an interesting thing too. This is not really the question that he asked, but there's even a difference in application, because I feel like most Sith Lords, at least in the film eras, they take on a title that is given to them. So they're Darth Vader, or Darth Tyrannus, or Darth Maul. Although for Maul, I guess that was his name too. But I guess what I was going to say is that we have examples too of Sith Lords both changing their name when they adopt a title, and using their name, like Darth Revan. Revan is just Revan.
Whereas you have Darth Malak, the creative genius, formerly Alec, and then you put an M in front of his name.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder if Revan wasn't Evan, but as far as we know, Revan was always called Revan. Because when the Jedi talk about him, they always talk about Revan.
Right.
But no, Malak has some sort of ridiculous last name too. It's like Alex Squigamilis or something. It's crazy. Knox, thank you. The origin of the term has many possible origins. Some think it's short for Dark Lord, but others think it is the corrupted version of the Rakatan word for emperor, both of which would make a lot of sense.
I like the second one better just because like the short form of Dark Lord makes it like the YOLO of titles to me.
Right, yeah. Like YOLO Vader.
Like there was a really cool Sith kid at the academy one day, and he's like, "Man, this is too long. I've got to come up with a hip way of saying this." So.
Yeah, I'm too cool for Dark Lord.
Yeah. Dark
Lord's just a bummer word. I need something neat.
gotta jazz this up a bit, as the kids say.
And then I remember because for Darth Vader's name, the out-of-universe explanation is, I think, there's always been a debate as to whether or not Vader is Vader because it's short for invader, which would work, or it's close to like Dutch for father or something like that. And for a while, I never liked that theory because it's like, why would Darth Vader call himself that if he didn't think he was a father? But then when we see how he gets his name in Sith, I could see I can see Palpatine doing that. Like, I'm going to name you Dark Father. So you remember this forever.
I mean, I kind of like both explanations for that, and I think
I'm fine with either one.
I can see Lucas choosing the name for both reasons.
Yes. Having an in-universe and an out-universe reason.
Right. At what point do we know that Palpatine's Sith name is Sidious? Because that's not in the original trilogy at all, is it?
No. I think no. He's called Lord Sidious in Phantom.
Right.
By the Trade Federation.
Right, because that was kind of my assumption, is that was an invention of the prequel trilogy, just to kind of play up that tension of, apparently not everyone knowing that Palpatine is going to be the Emperor.
Right. I remember being I was like, I would have been 10 at this point. No, I was probably closer to 9. And I have the dictionary. I had a making of book of Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because Ian McDiarmid is listed in the credits of the Phantom Menace as Palpatine, but he's not listed as Darth Sidious. Like, there is no Darth Sidious in the credits. There's Chancellor Palpatine, and he's not / Sidious. Like, he's not even mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I remember being a little kid, and I was looking at the credits for Jedi, and I realized it was the same actor who played the Emperor in Jedi and played Palpatine in Phantom Menace, and I figured it out, and I felt so smart.
Right.
I was like, I figured it out, guys. I caught on to the game, and I remember telling everyone. And then, like, some years later, I went, everyone
did that. Yeah. Well, I remember when I first showed the films to my youngest sister, I kind of got her into Star Wars. Which she's reading her first Star Wars novels now. I gave her Last Shot and Most Wanted because she loved Solo enough that she wanted to read the books that were related to it.
That's cool.
But I remember, like, we watched the whole original trilogy first, and then we watched the prequel trilogy in release order, which Yoda Bauer did a really good video about which order to watch the videos in. I'll plug that for her if you've not seen that on our channel. But when we got to Revenge of the Sith, like, she didn't know, like, after having watched all 3 of the prequel trilogy films, like, when Palpatine becomes the Emperor, like, she didn't see that coming. So, and I'm like, oh, like, I didn't even mention it because I just assumed the same way that you assumed your work friend knew that Anakin was Vader.
Right.
Like, I just thought it was obvious, and it was a Superman Clark Kent kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah. And it's just like, what? And it was how mind-blowing that was.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about, like, specific Sith, but, like, in terms of Sith philosophy, I find them very interesting. I also did a series on balance of the Force here, and in that I basically posit, to use a fancy word, that the dark side isn't evil, but the Sith are evil. Right. And that there's a difference. The dark side and the Sith are not the same thing, in the same way the Jedi and the light side are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Knox will particularly care for this, but my theory, so if there needed to be a chosen one, and then that needed to balance the Force, then logic dictates the Force is unbalanced. And my personal theory, until anything proves otherwise, which it very well could, is that the Sith are the reason why the Force is unbalanced, because they have misused the dark side.
Right.
How do you... anybody who's interested can hear me prattle on for, like, a sum total of an hour on that. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you see them as different things? Do you see the Sith as a perversion of the dark? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess to a lesser extent than how you feel about it. Knox, of course, believes that the Sith bring stability and technological advances and unity, which is a very Knox thing to say. But yeah, and they could bring people back to life. We don't really know that.
Yeah.
But
true Sith never dies.
I guess a lot of it depends on the distinction we make between the dark side and the Sith, because obviously the Sith are not the only users of the dark side. The
Right.
Sith has a very particular philosophy, and like I don't know so much that it is like the presence of the Sith that caused the problem, because as you were saying earlier, you also believe that it's Darth Bane's Sith that kind of create the imbalance, and that's after the Sith already existed as a philosophy to a certain extent. But I don't know. It's more about, so like if we go to the like the Sith code or whatever from the KOTOR era and stuff, like just the idea, that peace is a lie. Like I feel
Right.
like peace is such an essential element of the Force, and I feel like the Force lends itself to a certain type of equilibrium,
Right.
to the extent that Anakin, or maybe even Revan, if you want to think about it that way, balance the Force. I feel like the Force lends itself to balance, and I feel like the Sith, in denying that there is a need for balance, create imbalance. So
I can see that.
I don't know that it's necessarily like the Sith or like teachings, but I feel like it's a misunderstanding of the Force in a way, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense, and I think some of that comes down to, I think the Sith have an unnatural view of the Force as a whole. One of the driving points of Bane's Sith, especially, is immortality. Bane wanted to live forever. He in the Bane trilogy, he's looking for a way to not die, and Palpatine in Legends clones himself, and it's kind of a running thing. And then you look at the Jedi, and you look at Yoda's talk to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. Death is a natural part of life.
Right.
Luke in Last Jedi talks to Rey and says, there's life, but there's also death when looking for balance. And that the Sith kind of looking for this sense of immortality, to preserve their natural life, their kind of physical life, is in essence to go against the will of the Force, because all things die eventually.
Right.
Which is different, say, than Qui-Gon's quest for immortality, because he was looking for immortality in the Force, not in the flesh.
Right. Well, and so Knox also says in chat that the view that the Sith create the imbalance is very Jedi-centric. Yeah. And I think there's a certain truth to that, too, in a way. And maybe this is interesting in a way that I've not thought about. Because if you look at the Jedi at the time of the Phantom Menace, when, Mace Windu is the first person, or I think it is, or maybe it's Qui-Gon who says something about, the prophecy that, there'd be a chosen one to bring balance to the Force. At that time, they also assume that the Sith are extinct. So from their point of view, if the Sith are extinct and yet imbalance exists anyway,
right,
then they can't assume that the Sith are the cause of the imbalance. Now that may be true from a larger perspective.
I kind of wonder, though, if they even believed in the Chosen One prophecy at first.
I don't think they did. I think they let themselves be deluded into thinking.
Yeah, I think it was once they knew the Sith returned that they kind of saw that. What I would say to Knox's point, and he's not going to like this answer at all, but in The Last Jedi, and this is something I've talked about quite a bit, it's just a tiny, tiny little reference that I think is going to have major, major implications. The temple that Luke is in when he's talking to Rey has a mosaic of the Prime Jedi. And the Prime Jedi, as described in like visual dictionaries and stuff, is like one of the original Jedi. It's the original embodiment of the Jedi. And that image is a very yin-yang kind of image. It shows the light and the dark together. Right. So where my, albeit headcanon, but there's nothing in current canon to really go against this, is that when the Jedi started, they were balanced. When the Jedi started, they weren't about rejecting the dark side, because the dark side is clearly represented within the Prime Jedi. And that the Jedi fell away from their true calling. They were so afraid of the dark side and its temptations that they rejected it, and in so have created a bias that they didn't need to have and they shouldn't have had. So absolutely, I mean, any opinion I'm going to have on the Force is going to be Jedi centric. I will tell you that bias right now. But I also believe that the Jedi lost their way when they refused to acknowledge the dark side of the Force. I mean, there's the hypocrisy is all through the prequel trilogy, where they're saying, don't be afraid, don't fear, fear's the path to the dark side. And the Jedi were terrified of the dark side. And they never saw that.
Right. Well, and to that same end, I think most people, even though I don't know that this is stated in canon anywhere, I think most people kind of generally understand that the light is not inherently good, nor is the dark inherently evil. But I've always been, well, I won't say I always have, but I've been of the opinion since the Unifying Force came out at the end of the NJO, that what balance was mastery of both. And to that extent, denying one or the other from the part of the Jedi or the Sith contributed to that imbalance.
Right.
I hate that white box around our chat now.
I do too.
I can't read that at all. But
I every now and again I'll type things that are sidetracky. Sorry.
No, it's fine. But yeah, so I think it's an interesting question, because I'm also a big believer in it, and it's not that you disagree with this, but I believe that the Force is so much bigger than the Jedi or the Sith that that one, I don't know that either of them could necessarily directly cause an imbalance, like just because they exist. But at the same time, I don't like it's such a bigger equation to me, I guess, than just the Jedi or the Sith. And I think that's the perspective that Luke has come to in The Last Jedi. He shuts himself off from the Force because I feel like he thinks the Jedi Order has to end, but he's not Kreia trying to kill the Force.
Right.
He has reached the understanding that maybe Jedi philosophy is problematic.
And I feel like, I guess here's a question for you. We talk a lot about balance of the Force, and this might be a little bit off topic from the Sith, but maybe not entirely. Balance and equilibrium are hard to keep, right? And inevitably, one nudge of one number, even, you have billions and billions, trillions and trillions of people in the galaxy.
Right.
And one person can kind of throw off the balance. Is the Force being out of balance inherently unnatural? Or is this the type of thing where maybe there have been 10 chosen ones, and sometimes it's a Jedi, and sometimes it's a Sith, and sometimes it's a Night Sister, and sometimes it's a monk, and the Force is in a constant state of rebalancing, because is balance obtainable? Is balance achievable forever?
Well, I see balance in the Force, like I said earlier, as like a tendency, and I hate to think about it in like physics terms like this, but if you have a pendulum and you pull it to one side and you let it swing, it's going to swing back and forth because its tendency is to hang straight. It's to find that middle ground. And so I don't see balance as necessarily a state of affairs that can be achieved as much as it's a central tendency that is a property of the Force.
Okay.
The same way that if you're Zen Buddhist, you want to achieve nirvana, or you want to achieve this level of sort of balance or equilibrium, but it's not necessarily. I mean, I guess for some of those people it is, but that's how I kind of see the Force, and so that it is a sort of constant back and forth. But I also believe that the Chosen One prophecy is so problematic for me, just because I believe that the nature of prophecy in general is, once you believe a prophecy is real, you look for evidence of it everywhere, and so I feel like the Jedi allowed themselves to be convinced that Anakin was this thing, when maybe, especially Yoda. I don't think Yoda believed in the prophecy. I think Mace Windu bought into it really hard after coming from a place where he didn't believe in it. I think Obi-Wan let himself believe in it. But yeah, no, I think that's possible, that there could have been people who brought balance to the Force before Anakin. To the extent that prophecy was true, though, I feel like maybe there was such an imbalance that existed that Anakin corrected something that was larger than imbalances that had existed previously. But I don't know that what kind of evidence there is necessarily to that effect.
I think where the Chosen One prophecy is problematic to me is that not so much the prophecy itself, but with Anakin, where I simultaneously want to feel as though the Chosen prophecy was an actual thing. I mean, unless Shmi was lying and had a partner, and Anakin has an actual father, like, there's clearly something special about Anakin, and to that extent I want it to be true, and to some extent I want it to be important that he killed both the Jedi and the Sith.
Right, yeah.
But I also don't want to absolve Anakin of personal choice within that, because I think if Anakin was fated to fall to the dark side, fated to murder all these people, and it wasn't his fault, he was like galactically possessed by destiny, I think it takes away from his character and the meaning of what he did, and the meaning of him coming back to save Luke. So that's a thing I've always struggled to get through my head.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate, like, the necessity of his choice, but also the idea that he had free will and that it was a choice.
Right. Well, the way I think about fate in that sense is not so much that it's something that's written in the proverbial stars and is unavoidable, but almost this is going to get esoteric here for a second. Are you familiar with Oedipus and Sophocles? I know I talked about this some yesterday.
Yes.
But Sophocles, the playwright, wrote the Oedipus trilogy. And Oedipus there's a prophecy that Oedipus will murder his father and marry his mother. And that freaks his parents out so much that they send him away. And because they send him away, he doesn't know who they are, and he murders his father and marries his mother. And so I don't see that so much as it was bound to happen, but whereas like the response like it was the prophecy that changed things. And so when I think about Anakin's fate, I think Anakin was fated to do that because people bought into that prophecy and believed him to be the fulfillment of it. Like, they treated him differently because they assumed he was the chosen one, and it was the way that they treated him differently that led to him going down that path. Whereas if that prophecy had never been made, or if they had never wanted it to apply to Anakin in particular, once they believed or once they knew that the Sith were back, I think it could have gone differently then. But I believe that the way things happened because of the prophecy led him down a path that sort of pushed him to that end. Because if you look at things like the Jedi being suspicious of Palpatine and trying to take advantage of Anakin's relationship, like, that puts him in a place to be corrupted by Palpatine. So it's like it's a series of choices So not rather than something that is just destined that will happen no matter what, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. I think that's kind of interesting. So like maybe this prophecy with Anakin, we're getting kind of off topic here now, but it's kind of like this litmus test,
right?
Where the Jedi found out about this Chosen One prophecy, met their Chosen One, and their response. Think of the dark side cave in Empire Strikes Back. I've always loved and been fascinated by the line of what's in there, only what you take with you. So the Chosen One prophecy and balance of the Force, what if balance means only what you mean it to mean? Right. So the Jedi saw Anakin as this unknown thing that they were afraid of. They were afraid of the Chosen One and what it could mean. And so kind of ended up falling away, where if the Jedi had been like, the Chosen One's here, it's time to change, and like let's use this as an opportunity to change, and maybe the age restriction isn't a thing, and maybe we should be more understanding. Maybe the Jedi could have come back from where they were. Alternatively, Palpatine met Anakin, and in Palpatine's mind, the Jedi are the problem, because to the Jedi, the Sith are always the problem. To the Sith, the Jedi, whatever. I don't know if I said that right, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. And so Palpatine meets Anakin, fully aware. In Legends, he'd be fully aware of it because to some degree, Plagueis was involved with Anakin's creation. In current canon, he would guess, he's this Chosen One, and he could use Anakin as a tool to destroy the Jedi. But maybe in using Anakin to destroy the Jedi, doomed himself to also be destroyed because he sees Anakin as this element of destruction is balance.
Right. I think that's probably true. And it's just like Luke says, Palpatine's overconfidence is his weakness. You know, if he hadn't been so confident that he could manage Anakin no matter what, then he would have killed him early on, I think.
After he'd used him to destroy the Jedi, like why put him in the suit? Why keep him?
Right. But it's interesting to me too, because and Knox asked a question about the Confederation that I want to get to in a second. But it's interesting to me too. I mean, our world explanation original trilogy came before the prequel trilogy, so things that were said in the prequel trilogy can't be addressed in the original trilogy. In universe, though, I think it's interesting that when Yoda trains Luke, he does not mention the prophecy at all.
Yeah.
And it could very well be because Yoda has just come to the point where he thinks they were wrong about the prophecy, which is what he says in Revenge of the Sith. Maybe we were just wrong about Anakin.
Right.
But he doesn't put that on Luke at all. He doesn't. We are the ones that put that on Luke, which is why I like where Luke's story goes. He didn't want him to go after Vader at all. Yeah. And that's why I think I like where Luke ends up in The Last Jedi, because we are the people that put this weight of the galaxy on Luke. Yoda doesn't do that. Yoda doesn't say the Force is imbalanced. Yoda doesn't use the language of balance at all with Luke. It's implied maybe in the sort of spiritualistic understanding of the Force in Empire, but he doesn't specifically say imbalance exists in the Force and there was a prophecy that somebody would fix that imbalance. And so it's interesting to me that Yoda, as one who believed so strongly in the presence of imbalance, if not the prophecy of the Chosen One, does not mention that to Luke at all. And I think it's interesting at the very least, and important maybe too.
Yeah. Well, and I get the vibe, Luke or Yoda kind of trains Luke kind of because he's strong-armed by Obi-Wan almost.
Right.
I think Yoda is almost training Luke from a place of defense. Like, not even in a you're going to restart the Jedi sort of way, but in a Yoda's goal is to not have Luke fall to the dark side.
Right.
Like, that's his primary goal, is to have Luke become not a Sith. Even more than it is for Luke to become a Jedi, Yoda wants him to be not a Sith.
Right.
And what you said about the Chosen One prophecy, I think it's very probable, in fact, probably most likely, that Yoda doesn't bring it up because he thinks that it wasn't real.
Right.
I do think there's a chance that it could also be that Yoda does think the prophecy is fulfilled. The specific line from Revenge is, a prophecy misread could have been.
Right.
Which could apply to Anakin, like we misread it and Anakin's not the chosen one, but it could also mean that balance is not what the Jedi thought it was.
Right.
And Yoda leaves the Jedi Order. Not the Jedi Order, but he leaves having failed to kill Palpatine.
Mm-hmm.
And he leaves, remember, he was the Grand Master. Yes, there was a Jedi Council, but Yoda was the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. He was the figurehead in charge. Like, every Jedi was his. And he failed them. He led them to war, which is against the Jedi Code, lost the war, failed to kill the Sith, even though you can argue that wanting to assassinate someone is also against the Jedi Code. So he's done all of these questionable things, and none of them worked.
Right.
And maybe he thinks that the Sith did exactly what they were supposed to do, and the Jedi deserved exactly what they got.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's just an alternative. I think what you said is more likely, but maybe that's why he doesn't bring it up, is because he thinks it was already fulfilled.
Right. I think that's a very Yoda type of thing to eventually, after, 2 decades of exile, to come around to that position. Maybe this is what, because Yoda obviously believes that the Force has a will. And if it happened that way, I can see Yoda believing maybe this is what was supposed to happen. And Fat Batman makes a point that I was going to make too. That Luke wasn't even Yoda's first choice.
No, it was Leia, which I love. I loved that so much when I read it.
That was one of my favorite things from the A Certain Point of View anthology, was that, Leia was the one that Yoda wanted, and Luke was kind of the one that he got. Because if you just get Return of the Jedi, then Leia's kind of the second choice. She's if this doesn't work out, there's another one. We got a spare Skywalker in the back. We can
sitting around.
This backup plan.
Her only power is flying through outer space. She can't do anything else.
Yeah. This is a completely different type of thing. I wonder if Leia possessed the power of battle meditation and didn't even know it.
I think it's super possible. I've always thought her powers manifested themselves in a diplomatic sort of way.
But I'm pretty sure we will, Fat Batman. I think we'll get an anthology book for
that one's 40th.
If for no other reason than I want the short story of the awkward meal that everyone has on Cloud City after Vader says, "Won't you join us?" Because that's going to be one of them, and so that's. I want the story of the dragon snake that swallows R2. Yeah. That's the one I want. Yeah, I think that's a good point too, Tyler. I think Obi-Wan believed in the prophecy. I think he believed it was about Luke and not about Anakin.
He's
at the time
up.
of the original trilogy. Yeah.
You were the chosen one. You were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. Because
even if Yoda still believes that maybe that was how the Force intended things to go, he's still written Anakin off too. Because he believes, this is his absolutist belief. He believes that the power of the dark side is something that you can't come back from. And he's not willing to give Anakin a choice at all. And that's where Luke is revolutionary in that.
I like that point too about what if Yoda thought Leia was the chosen one, because then it would explain why he didn't mention it to Luke.
Right.
Because he thinks Luke is the one that needs all the help, and Leia's the one who's got her life together. So she's clearly the better Jedi.
I think it was Knox though asked a question earlier about whether or not
let's get to that.
The Confederacy, the leaders of the Confederacy, were evil. So the way I think about this, and I have a lot of opinions about prequel trilogy politics, more than we have time to talk about.
We can do that on another week.
Because I think not sort of real world politics in Star Wars, but I think the politics of Star Wars is interesting to me. both in terms of like prequel trilogy, and then especially with like bloodline politics too.
Yes.
That was really interesting to me. But I think the leaders of the Confederacy are evil, but not because they are in league with the Sith. I think the Sith were able to use them because they were evil. I think if you look at Newt Gunray, Newt Gunray is about subjugation of people for his own personal profit. I think the banking clan is kind of along those same lines. And so it's the one thing that I wish I knew more about, and I could talk about Count Dooku all day long, because I feel like Count Dooku is one of the most important people in the prequel trilogy for me. And we don't know how much Count Dooku personally bought into the philosophy of the Confederacy, but they were able to wrap this sort of almost libertarian style of political philosophy up in a way that was, appealing to these evil, not that all corporations are evil, but to these evil sort of
Nor
corporate.
all libertarians.
Sure. No, right. But was able to shroud this sort of philosophy or to use this philosophy in a way that would be appealing to evil people to manipulate them to their own ends. So I believe that Palpatine was evil in a way, because I don't believe that order for the galaxy was his ultimate goal. I believe that's the language that he used to pursue his own goals. And so I believe that they're evil, but not because they were in league with the Sith, but because they were greedy and bad people.
And to that point, I would agree. I can't say it any better than you already did. But I think the leaders were evil, and to the extent that the leaders were evil, the organizations were doing evil.
Yeah.
But not that you implied this, but I don't think the Separatists as a whole.
No, I don't think so either, and I think that's the point that Knox is making there too. That the ideal was that the Republic was corrupt, and it was.
It was, absolutely was.
That's why, to me, Terry's quick fix for the prequel trilogy is to make Qui-Gon and Dooku the same person, and not have Qui-Gon die in the first movie, but rather be manipulated not into joining the Sith, but be manipulated into starting the Confederacy, because Qui-Gon was ticked off at how corrupt the Republic was in Episode 1, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Right.
Palpatine used existing Republic corruption as a prelude to gaining power. That corruption was there. Like it was right. And so like I don't believe that the Confederacy itself or its political ideals were wrong or evil. But in so much as it was a confederacy that was made up of other organizations, I believe the Trade Federation, the Techno Union Army, and the Banking Clan were evil. If that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Another comment from the Fat Batman I want to get into, just because I am also a Kylo fan, which is Kylo also wants to balance too in the Jedi and the Sith and start it all over, albeit he's going about it in a genocide sort of way. I think Kylo wants to start everything over. I don't know if Kylo is going after balance, though. I don't think Kylo is that ideological. I think Kylo is responding. This sounds ridiculous, and it kind of feeds into the number one complaint about his character. But Kylo is just a really mad, messed up teenager who's still a teenager in his 20s.
Right.
And he's just really upset at how he's been treated his whole life. And I firmly believe he wants to be supreme leader only so no one else can boss him around or use him anymore. And I think he wants to burn down the Jedi for obvious reasons in the Sith. And, I never thought of this until this exact moment. And I really like that you pointed that out. He wants to destroy the Jedi and the Sith, but he idolizes his grandfather, who he still believes is Vader, right? Because when he's like basically praying to him in The Force Awakens, he's talking about being tempted back to the light, and he's talking about Vader. But in that scene, he's saying, "I'll finish what you've started."
Right.
So how can he idolize his grandfather that he thinks is a Sith, but then also want to destroy the Sith along with the Jedi? Is that a character shift? Has he changed? Is he no longer idolizing Vader? Or does he think what Vader started is the destruction of both the Jedi and the Sith?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think the answer to that lies in the fact that I believe that Snoke appeared to be Anakin to Kylo. Like, I feel like that's how Snoke manipulated Kylo, is by making him think Anakin was speaking to him. And so I think what he's wanting to finish is maybe not so much what we have seen Anakin do, but rather what Snoke told him Anakin was doing. And we may not have all the answers to that. But I definitely believe, I don't think for a minute Kylo cares about the First Order.
No, not for a second.
I don't know that Kylo cares about his own personal power in the way that Sith philosophy kind of lends itself to. I think Kylo feels betrayed by everyone and everything, and I think he wants vengeance on everyone and everything because he feels betrayed. I think his tragedy is a very different one, because and he's not wrong about that.
Right.
I mean, even if for just a brief second, Luke betrayed him, and Snoke has betrayed him, and he can, if you look at Bloodline, it's very easy to see where he can see his parents have betrayed him. I think he feels hurt by everyone, and everywhere he goes, he just ends up getting hurt. And so I think his desire to let it all die is because he wants to do something new, but not for the sake of the newness, but because he thinks everybody else is crappy, and he wants to be out from under the thumb of all these people that have hurt him in the past.
Yeah. What I was going to say is I think we're so used to Star Wars villains that are out for their power, and it's about how powerful they can be. And with Kylo, I think he's about taking away everyone else's power, which it's a semantics difference, but it's also a perspective difference.
Yeah.
I don't think Kylo is, I want to amass my own power. I think Kylo is, I took Snoke's power away, and I took Snoke's First Order away.
Right.
Like, it wasn't about getting control of the First Order. It's about taking from Snoke what was Snoke's.
Yeah.
And it's just a difference in that.
Right.
And so I think that's, I mean, he's really just not ideological at all. And which is a stark contrast to one of your favorites there, which is Dooku, is entirely ideological.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's only a Sith because of ideology. Not the Sith ideology, but he's only a Sith because they stand in opposition to the Republic, I think.
Right. I think so, too. And Knox, I'm going to agree and disagree with what you say about Kylo, because Kylo is definitely a whiny kid with daddy issues.
100%.
And it seems problematic that a whiny kid with daddy issues would be able to take out all of these millennia-old orders. But I think the reason he does that is because, number one, he's the grandchild of the Chosen One. He's the great-grandchild of the Force itself, if you want to think about it that way. And I think they underestimated him. He's a powerful kid. And to piss off a powerful kid and give him no reason to care about anything is dangerous. You know, and Luke and Snoke, both, they thought they had a finger on who Kylo was, and they didn't realize what they were doing to him. And so I think it's a certain type of hubris to say, look, we are these established orders, and we can treat this kid however we want because he's not a threat to us. And then he becomes almost nihilistic and like, screw all you guys. I'll do whatever I gotta do. Like that, like it sucks. You know, if you're a Jedi or a Sith, it sucks, and I can see how you could be upset about it. But I think they took that kid for granted, and they created something they couldn't handle.
And, you know, in the topic of Star Wars being too political these days, I could make some very interesting connections there that I won't out of my own rules of talking about politics on stream. But just think on that for a second and see if you can draw some connections.
No, I know where you're going. But,
well, we've had the... Yeah, you know exactly where
that person doesn't have a Rey, though. Like, that's the problem.
Exactly. No, completely agree. Completely agree.
And Sarge, of course, thinks Kylo's hot. which is also not wrong.
I get accused of that a lot because I'm such a Kylo fan, but honestly, I like him in his armor. Weird as that sounds, I like the Revan mask.
I mean, Poe is clearly the hot one.
No. If I was gonna bring anybody home, it'd be Finn. I'm sorry, guys.
Well,
Unless it's John Boyega with a really bad Pacific Rim mustache that makes him look creepy.
Agree to disagree. But really, I don't want Poe Dameron. I want Llewyn Davis. I want the beard playing folk songs on a guitar to me, and it just happens to be the same actor.
I want Magneto, but what are we gonna do if we're gonna go out of universe? This just took an interesting turn.
Yeah, it did. And Nox, again, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm saying that's the point.
Right.
Like, the point of Kylo is that he is naturally powerful, and they wanted to treat him like any other person, and he was not any other person.
Right.
But that definitely sucks from the perspective of the Jedi or the Sith, but like, just because they're the Jedi or the Sith doesn't mean that they're impenetrable. I mean, that was the point of the prequels for the Jedi, and it was the same story in the end for the Sith too.
I think he's really an embodiment of in a lot of ways, he really is an embodiment of the dark side, where he does not have any kind of discipline or any kind of self-restraint. He is just emotional reaction going on my gut. In the way the Sith are that way, but it's not without purpose. So, like, I've been playing through KOTOR on the dark side for the first time, and we would be at different impasses where I'm like, okay, well, I feel like the dark side thing is to just kill him, but he's useful to me. And you'd remind me that, well, the dark side isn't always just instant murder.
Right.
If you can use a person, that also benefits the Sith. And I think that's the difference between, a Sith like Bane and a Sith like Darth Malak, the second worst Sith Lord to have existed, the worst one being his apprentice Darth Bandon, who's definitely the worst Sith to have ever existed.
I don't know. It's so interesting to me, though, because Kylo and Snoke don't really have the trappings of the Sith. But I think it also... One of the things that I think is worth pointing out in this discussion, and I think I thought about this when you made your Dooku point, I think some people are Sith because they buy into the Sith philosophy, and I think some people are Sith because it's the only dark side game in town, if that makes sense. And so I think there's a difference.
Makes total sense.
There's a difference among Sith Lords too. And if you look at somebody like Bane, and I think this is probably why Bane appeals to Nox and people like Nox, is because Bane is about the philosophy. Bane is about this is an order, this is the point of this, we are using the dark side for this reason, and we're going to create a code, we're going to create rules to kind of govern this philosophy, this point of view. Other people want to use the dark side, and the Sith are the ones who will teach them how. And they could care less about the philosophy. Like, if you look at somebody like, is it Darth Nihilus is the one in the mask from KOTOR 2? If you look at Nihilus just wants to consume things through the power of the dark side. I can guarantee Nihilus doesn't give two craps about the philosophy of the Sith. And so, like, I think there's a difference there too. And I think Dooku fits into that in a certain way. I think Anakin fits into that. I don't think when Anakin fell to the dark side, it wasn't because he had been taught this is what Sith philosophy is, and I find that appealing. It's my wife is going to die, and I'm trying to figure out how to save her. Like that's part of his tragedy, is that he was manipulated. And Palpatine may have approached the Sith differently in that regard. But I think there's a distinction there too.
Well, and what you were saying, Nox, help me here if I'm not remembering all. It's been years since I've read Path of Destruction, but Bane was a miner. He had this terrible life underground. He somehow ended up in a military. I can't remember whose, and I can't remember how he got there, but I don't think that's as important. He was fighting in a war, and I can't remember if he was on the side of the Sith and they found out he was Force sensitive and he got brought into the Sith, or if he was fighting against the Sith and they got captured. But he was in the Sith army. Okay, so he was in the Sith army, and they discovered. And anyway, he somehow got put into the Sith Academy, but it was totally a case of the Sith were the only dark side game in town for him.
Yeah.
But then he came to care about the philosophy, and that's why he wanted to burn the Sith down and start them over again.
Well, it's the same way if you look at really anything, any like real world political philosophy or like big movements, particularly ones that lend themselves to violence. Some people join them because they want to be violent, and some people join them because there's a philosophy there that they buy into. You know, there were people that fought in the American Revolution because they wanted to burn stuff down, not because they cared about independence. And so no matter how noble your goal is,
right.
I think those things are separate.
Well, and you also just have the people who join the army because the army has food.
Right, sure, yeah.
You know, and they have no philosophy either. They just know if they shoot somebody, they get to eat dinner that day. And then that becomes why they do it.
No. Any other quick questions about the Sith or anything? I think we could almost get a whole other, not next week, but I feel like we could get a whole other hour discussion out of this. Because we really didn't, apart from our discussion at the beginning, we didn't talk about, very many different Sith Lords in particular.
Which we could easily do. I think it went some interesting places though. That's why I like doing these live as opposed to like a regular podcast. I suppose a regular podcast would be easy to rename if we went off topic. But I like these live chats because we can kind of just go where people want to go.
I think so,
as opposed to us guessing.
And Fat Batman, I saw you answered that question or asked that question earlier about Batman. I think Batman would be something entirely different. I think for me, the Star Wars analogy to Batman is Mace Windu, somebody that wants to, doesn't necessarily want to be violent, but is strong in physical power ways, but uses it for good. But I don't know. I don't think Batman necessarily fits in that mold easily either way.
I feel like he might be, not that I am the least Batman expert in this chat, but not in terms of early story, but late Clone Wars, he might be closer to a Ventress.
Yeah, I could even see that too. Yeah.
I mean, she was never really out for good per se, but she kind of did hit a point where she at least didn't want bad to happen.
I mean, Batman definitely would have been trained by the Jedi, but I don't think he would have stayed in the Jedi Order, but I don't think he would have been a Sith. So maybe he's like the anti-Ventress. Ventress was trained by the Sith. Because Batman, if you look at Batman's mythology, he's gone to all these martial arts schools around the world and studied in the, these dojos in the Himalayas and stuff like that. And I think that's the equivalent of getting Jedi training, but not wanting to be a member of those orders.
Tyler asked a very interesting question. What level do you think someone who wants to be on the light needs to acknowledge the dark, use it, and control it? So...
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. That's a good question.
It's a very good question. That might be a whole question for an eventual talk about the Jedi stream.
So could you? I mean, I guess the way I'm thinking about this question, and Tyler, you can tell me if this is wrong, but if you bought into the Sith philosophy but didn't want to use the dark side, could you be a Sith? If you say, I buy into this piece is a lie, passion is great, personal power kind of stuff, but was well, I'm just not very angry as a person, so I can't use the anger powers because I'm
not angry.
I'm Fred, the jovial Sith.
Someone please write that. We should pitch that to Chuck Wendig. I feel like that's right in his wheelhouse.
I'm sure there's room in Star Wars Adventure somewhere for that, right, Callie?
Somewhere for that. I feel like where my answer on this is complicated is what I was saying before. I don't think the dark side is inherently evil, but it is far more tempting, and it's far easier to use. So, like, if the dark side is fire, there's a lot of really good, useful, practical applications for fire that are not death, destruction. You know, there's cooking, which is necessary. There's keeping warm, which is necessary. There's crafting, which you have to do. But when you're really angry, it becomes really easy to just set something on fire. If you just have fire in your hands, you can just go, whoops, I hope you didn't want that house. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it becomes a thing where I think the Jedi would have been benefited by knowing the dark. Because when you know about it, I think in a weird way, this has a lot of current day political applications too that I won't get into. But if you think about it, they're there. Knowing about a thing does not inherently make you more likely to do the thing, but it can make you more responsible when you're faced with the thing, right? So the argument of if we just never introduce Jedi Padawans to the dark side, they'll just somehow never know about it and they'll be fine and they'll never be tempted by it, is a joke. Where if you introduce Jedi Padawans to the dark side so that they knew what it felt like and they knew what it was asking them to do, then they could interact with it responsibly.
Right.
As to how much, I think in anything with the Force, the moment you start asking, this is kind of my answer for balance too, is balance a 50-50 split on the light and dark, or is it some other percentage necessarily? Yeah. I think the moment you want to quantify it, you're looking at it wrong.
I think so too. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, just the way the Jedi, like midi-chlorians are a thing, they're in canon, you kind of got to deal with it. But the moment you're measuring someone's midi-chlorians and using that as an SAT test to whether or not you get into Jedi college, you've missed the point. So how much, you know, I don't think there's a quantifiable number to how much of the dark side a Jedi could use.
Right.
But I think it depends on the Jedi. Mace Windu could handle using the dark side a heck of a lot more than your average Jedi. Right. His number is very different than, say, I don't know, Plo Koon's. Not that Plo Koon is a particular problem, but he is a very different kind of Jedi.
Right. Yeah, I want so much to explore the other extreme. I want the Sith who, and I don't know, Knox, everybody would love Fred. Like, nobody would want
for the jovial Sith.
Yeah, Fred would be best friends with everybody. He wouldn't care that you wanted to rule the galaxy. He just wants to hang out.
Yeah. He would think you're correct for wanting to rule the galaxy.
And he would let you do it and pose no threat at all.
Yep.
Like, he just wants to, chill out on your couch once you rule the galaxy.
Fred the Jovial Sith is the Sith that makes the cookies that you come to the dark side for. Like, you don't want to kill him.
That's exactly right. Like, he makes such good cookies. Like, wow.
Like, why would you want to kill the best cookie chef? Or the best cookie maker. It's
just ever. Like yesterday when you were playing, you were talking about the Sith archaeologist. Like, like Fred would be down with that dude. He's like, like you go, you dust off that holocron. That's right.
Look at you go. You'll be so angry when you dust off that holocron.
I'm totally going to write fan fiction of Fred the Jovial Sith now.
I want you to.
Look
if
for
you
that
write
on
that, I will actually write my fan fiction, and that'll be a deal.
I need to finish my other fiction thing that I was writing.
Yeah, you too.
I might have kind of missed the moment for that, though. I don't know. But
yeah.
But Fred the Jovial Sith is a thing that has to happen, though.
Yes, I agree.
But we're over time by a little bit, though.
Yeah, we are at time here.
So we'll have to do this again, because this has been fun.
This was a good discussion. Thank you, everyone, for contributing. We would not have been able to come up with half of this stuff without having you guys to bounce off of.
Right. Yeah, Fat Batman. I'm down with that too.
Yep.
But just to give you a little preview of next week and a plug for some stuff that's coming up on our channel, we should be finishing out Jess's Dark Side playthrough of KOTOR next week.
I'm just the Starforge. We finished the Unknown World, yesterday.
So
And we have just the Star Wars. And I'm pretty excited because I have absolutely no idea how it goes. It might go exactly the same as it always has, or it might not. But having never played Darkside, this is the first point in the game where the events and the dialogue are going to be fundamentally different from anything I've ever seen. So I'm pretty excited for next week.
But then next week's StreamCast, I think we can go ahead and tell you it's probably going to be on Friday instead of Thursday. So look for that next Friday.
Yep.
But also, I think we're going to do a KOTOR StreamCast where we talk about Knights of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic 2, or things like that. So if you like those games, and I know some of you do, if you like SWOTOR, the MMORPG, we've never played that, but we'll talk about it, I guess.
Yep. If you want to tell us things about it, I've read the novels. I can talk about the novels.
So that's what we're going to do next week. We're going to wrap up KOTOR on Justice Stream early in the week, and then we will do that for our StreamCast at the end of the week. But we hope that you will follow us on all the things. If you're not already, make sure you like the stream. I tell you this every week. I don't want to be criticizing our friends here, but there are a whole lot more of you that watch this than those of you that like this. So hit that like button. It's just right there. Like if you're watching it, like you can see it. So like the stream, subscribe, hit the notifications.
And it's not just to make us feel good or to make us feel like frick. If you don't want to, hit the dislike button.
Yeah, sure. Just let us know you're out there.
The way YouTube's strange magics work is the more engagement we get, the more we're promoted. So if you like or dislike the stream, either one actually helps just as much.
It's like I tell my students about course evaluations. I don't really care if they're bad. I just want you to do them. So, smash that whatever button you want, as long as it's not the unsubscribe button.
That's the only button you shouldn't hit.
That one you are banned from hitting. But follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Check out our forums. All those things. That Tumblr is still out there. Nobody's found it yet. I'm disappointed. But I think that's going to do it for us this week here on Port Haven's World Cup Extravaganza. And we'll see you guys next week.